Trust is like a paper. Once it's crumpled, it can't be perfect again. I should have known. I should have seen the signs. But like any man in love, I ignored the warnings, chalked everything up to work stress, busy schedules, or whatever excuse seemed easiest to believe. It wasn't until I stood in the doorway that night, staring at her, my wife, trying to look me in the eye, that the truth finally slapped me in the face. And I couldn't pretend anymore. It was just another normal evening. I got home from a long day at work, the usual routine. I took the keys from my pocket, let myself in through the back door like I always do, expecting to find Diane sitting at the kitchen table, maybe reading or making dinner, just like before. But the house was silent. Too silent. I was used to Diane being busy. She was always out with friends or working, claiming she needed time for herself. But tonight something was different. I felt it in the air, like a low hum of tension that buzzed between us, even before I walked through the door. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat at the kitchen table, waiting. When I checked my phone, it was already 9:30. Diane should have been home by now. Another late night, I thought. She had been getting these a lot lately. Long work events, girls' nights. Excuses that didn't quite sit right with me. But I wasn't the type of man to press too hard. I trusted her, until I started to trust my gut. When the door finally opened, it wasn't Diane's usual cheerful entrance. She didn't hum to herself like she always did when she came home. This time, she stepped in with her head down, her eyes not quite meeting mine. She was wearing a perfume I didn't recognize, and her lipstick was smeared, like she had been kissing someone. Hard. I knew right then something was wrong. I didn't stand up. I didn't make a scene. I just looked at her with steady eyes, trying to hide the anger that burned in my chest. I hadn't asked any questions yet, but the tension between us was thick enough to cut through. "Where were you, Diane?" I asked, my voice calm but demanding. Her eyes flickered to the side, then back to mine. "Work ran late," she said, too quickly. The smile she tried to put on was weak, forced. I didn't buy it. Not for a second. I was done being patient. "You've been coming home late a lot lately, haven't you?" I pushed, my voice growing colder. "I don't know what's going on, but I'm done pretending it's nothing." She stood there in silence, looking like a deer caught in headlights. The excuses she was used to spinning weren't going to work tonight. I wasn't buying the lies anymore. "I asked you a question, Diane," I repeated, my voice cutting through the air. "Where were you?" Her lips quivered, and she swallowed hard. I could see her brain working overtime, searching for a plausible story. Her hand gripped the edge of the counter like she was trying to hold herself together. She wasn't sure how long she could keep pretending. I could see it in her eyes. The guilt. Then she broke. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words barely audible. "I've been seeing someone else." For a moment, everything went silent. My heart sank. The pain hit me like a sucker punch to the stomach. But I didn't react immediately. I just stared at her, not quite believing what I was hearing. Chris. That was her lover's name. The name she said with so much shame, as if it was somehow supposed to soften the blow. "Chris," I repeated, the name tasting like acid in my mouth. "Who the hell is Chris?" Her eyes dropped to the floor, unable to meet my gaze. He's an old friend. We reconnected a while ago, and it just happened." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Diane had been lying to me. For months. "You think I'm just supposed to accept that, Diane? That this, I'm motion between us, between the life we'd built, is nothing?" She shook her head, desperately trying to reach me. "John, I didn't mean for it to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." I clenched my fist, my jaw tight. The sting of her betrayal was burning through me, but I wasn't about to lose control. That wasn't who I was. I had always prided myself on being a man of honor, a man of his word. I worked hard for everything I had, everything, and for years I had built my life around this woman, this marriage. And now she was standing in front of me, telling me she had thrown it all away. For what? "Don't you dare try to apologize." I shot back, my voice low and seething. "You've been sneaking around with this guy for months, and now you think you can just say sorry and make it better?" I wasn't letting her off the hook. I wasn't some naive fool, standing there, accepting her excuses. Not anymore. I had given her everything, my trust, my love, my life. And she had taken it all and thrown it away without a second thought. I wasn't going to let that go. "You've been lying to me," I said, my words sharp as knives. "You've been lying to my face, and I've been stupid enough to believe you." "How long, Diane?" I stepped closer, my eyes never leaving hers. "How long have you been sleeping with him?" Her face turned pale as she backed away, the words caught in her throat. I wasn't letting her off easy. I needed the truth. I deserved it. 6 months, she finally whispered, barely audible. We started talking again a while ago, and it just happened. I never meant for it to go this far. 6 months. That's how long she had been betraying me. While I was working, trusting her, building our life together, she had been out there, living a lie with some other man. 6 months. I couldn't breathe. I could barely think straight, but the rage inside me was boiling over. I wasn't going to let this woman get away with it. "You think you could just get away with this? You think it's that simple?" I growled. "No, Diane. No more lies. No more games. This is over." She reached out to me, her hand trembling, but I pulled away, my eyes cold with fury. "Don't touch me." And just like that, everything I had built with her, everything I thought was real, came crashing down. I'm not a man who lets things slide. I never have been. I didn't get to where I am in life by being passive, by letting people walk all over me. I'm the kind of guy who takes care of his own business and takes pride in his work. I built Hearthstone landscaping from the ground up. It wasn't easy, but I put in the hours. I worked long days, made the right moves, and never made excuses. And that's the way I've always lived my life. My family was always everything to me. My father taught me that. He was a hard-working man, the kind of man who kept his promises and stuck by his word. He never gave up on what mattered most, his family. And he made sure I learned the same values. That's why it stung so damn much when Diane betrayed me. She was supposed to be my partner in all of this, the one person who had my back. And now, I had nothing left. I wasn't going to let her destroy everything I had worked for, everything I believed in. The second she admitted to what she had done, I knew I had to take control. The rage I felt had to go somewhere, and I wasn't going to let it consume me. No, this time I was going to make sure she faced the consequences. This wasn't going to be the end of it. It was only the beginning. The night I found out, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at the wreckage below. It wasn't just the anger. It wasn't even the betrayal, although that was enough to take your breath away. What got to me the most was the sudden realization that everything I had built, everything I trusted, was a lie. And the person who had been my closest partner, my wife, was the one who had orchestrated it all. 6 months. I could barely hear her voice over the pounding of my own heart. She was standing there, eyes wide, trying to explain how it just happened, how she never meant to hurt me, but I couldn't process it. My mind was swimming. 6 months. I had been living with a shadow, a lie, and I hadn't seen it. I felt like a fool, but I wasn't a fool. Not anymore. It didn't hit me all at once. At first, it was subtle, the kind of thing you dismiss when you don't want to confront it. She was working more, staying out late, and coming home with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I could feel it. It was a slow pull away from me, a creeping distance. She'd pick up her phone, smile at something on the screen, then quickly put it down when I walked into the room. She'd start locking her phone at night, things I had never thought twice about before. But the first thing that really made me question her loyalty was something small, something that shouldn't have even mattered. We were at a family barbecue about a month ago. Diane was talking to an old friend of hers, a guy named Chris, someone I'd never met before. I watched them laughing together, too closely, too easily. At first, I thought I was being paranoid, just two people reconnecting, nothing more. But something about the way she looked at him made my gut twist. I shook it off, convinced I was just overthinking it. It wasn't until later that night, when I saw Chris pull away from the party in his car, that the thought gnawed at me. Why hadn't Diane come inside to say goodbye? She stayed out there with him, talking quietly in the driveway for longer than was normal. It wasn't the first time she'd acted like this. Over the weeks, I had caught her looking at her phone more often, texting more frequently. She'd stop what she was doing whenever I came around like she was hiding something. I had to know. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The second incident came a week later. Diane had been working late again, and I was home alone, trying to relax with a drink. She left for her work event but didn't text me when she said she would. I checked my watch. It was nearly 10:30 p.m. When she finally called, her voice was breathless. "Sorry, John, it's running late. I'll be home soon." I thought nothing of it, but I could hear something in her voice. It wasn't just tiredness, it was guilt. I'd been with Diane long enough to know when something was off. The next few days were full of little inconsistencies. She wouldn't leave her phone out in the open anymore. When I asked her about her late-night meetings, she would deflect with vague answers. It wasn't just that I didn't trust her. It was that I knew something was wrong, and she wasn't even trying to hide it. But it wasn't until the night I decided to follow her that everything came crashing down. I didn't plan on it. I wasn't some suspicious, paranoid wreck of a man who couldn't trust his wife. But something snapped inside me that night. Diane had been gone again, out with some old friends from work. I'd been pacing the house, unable to sit still, when the impulse hit me. I grabbed my keys and started my truck. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. I wasn't even sure I wanted to catch her. But deep down, I already knew. I followed her to a little restaurant across town, a place she had never mentioned. I parked down the street, trying to keep my distance. I watched as Diane entered the building with Chris, the same guy from the barbecue, the one who had been too familiar with her. They were laughing together, leaning in close. I could barely hear them, but the way they acted, it was obvious. They weren't just friends. My chest tightened. I felt sick, like someone had just taken a sledgehammer to my gut. I could see everything clearly now. It wasn't just a slip-up. It wasn't just some harmless flirtation. This was an affair. The next day, when she came home, I was waiting for her. There was no calm greeting, no small talk. Diane opened the door, expecting the usual warm reception. But she froze when she saw me standing there, arms crossed, eyes cold. "I know what's been going on, Diane," I said, my voice steady. There was no need to raise it. I didn't need to shout. She knew. She already knew this conversation was coming. "I saw you last night. I saw you with Chris." Her face drained of color. She stammered, trying to make some excuse, but I wouldn't let her. "Don't lie to me," I said, cutting her off. "Don't give me the work event excuse again. I followed you. I watched you with him, Diane. You've been lying to me for months. How long were you planning on keeping this a secret?" She tried to speak, but the words were lost. She opened her mouth, then closed it, unable to face me. I never meant for it to happen," she whispered, her voice barely audible. It's not you, John." Don't." I snapped, my patience slipping. "Don't try to explain this. You don't get to make excuses anymore. You've been seeing him for months, and now I have to deal with this betrayal. This isn't something I can just forgive. It's over." She collapsed onto the couch, hands trembling, tears welling up in her eyes. But there was no sympathy left in me. There was no pity for the woman who had broken my trust into 1,000 pieces. "I trusted you," I said, the pain now creeping into my voice. "But now, I can't even look at you the same way. You've destroyed everything." I spent the next few hours pacing the house, my mind a blur of anger and disbelief. Diane had apologized a dozen times, begging me to forgive her. But I wasn't some weak man who would fall for that. I had been loyal to her for years. She had taken everything from me with her lies, her selfishness. And now it was my turn to take something back. I wasn't going to allow her to walk away from this without consequences. No, I wasn't a fool. I had worked too hard for everything we had built together, and I wasn't going to let her just waltz away from it. I was going to make sure she paid for what she did. I walked to the desk, opened my laptop, and started working. First things first, I needed to protect myself. Diane wasn't getting a cent. The house, the savings, the investments, they were all mine. The transfer of money to a private account was simple enough. I wasn't going to let her touch a thing, not after everything she had done. Then I called my lawyer. I told her everything. The affair, Diane's lies. I wasn't interested in a long, drawn-out court battle, but I needed to make sure everything was legally locked down. Diane wouldn't get a penny from me. The next few days were torturous. Diane tried everything. She sent me texts, called me, even tried to approach me when I was alone. But I didn't respond. I couldn't. Every time she spoke, every time she begged, it felt like she was trying to reframe everything to suit her. She was the victim now, wasn't she? No. I wasn't going to fall for it. I shut her out completely. No phone calls, no texts, nothing. The silence between us was deafening, but I needed it. I needed to feel the control slipping back into my hands. And Diane's presence had become a constant reminder of the lies she had told. I needed her to feel the weight of what she had done, to understand that there would be no easy way out. No more apologies. I wasn't a man who liked to make a scene, but Diane had forced my hand. Slowly, I started to tell the people around us the truth. I didn't shout it from the rooftops, but I made sure that the people who mattered knew exactly what she had done. Our friends, her friends, family. It wasn't just about hurting her. It was about showing her that this was the price she would pay. The social fallout began almost immediately. Diane's friends started pulling away. Family members distanced themselves. People didn't want to be around a liar. And now, everyone knew. And I didn't feel bad about it. I wasn't trying to get revenge for the sake of it. I was showing her that her actions had consequences. She wasn't going to walk away from this untouched. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about any of the superficial things. What it was about was taking back control of my life. Diane had stolen my peace of mind, and now I was going to take it back. I had spent enough time being the good husband, the one who always put everyone else first. Well, now it was time for me. No more second chances. No more trying to fix the unfixable. Diane had made her choice, and now it was my turn to make mine. The next few days after Diane's confession were the most surreal of my life. I spent my mornings at work, keeping myself busy, but my mind was constantly spinning with thoughts of what she had done, what I had seen. It wasn't just the affair itself that haunted me. It was the way she had betrayed the trust we'd built. The years of quiet mornings, dinners together, vacations where we laughed, and moments when we had held hands, thinking we were each other's whole world. And now it all felt like a lie. But I wasn't going to fall into despair. That wasn't me. I didn't waste time on self-pity or regret. Diane had made her choice, and I wasn't going to let her decision destroy me. Instead, I decided to take control. I was done being the man who kept his anger and pain bottled up. Now, I was going to act. The first step in my revenge plan was to secure my financial future. I'd worked too hard for everything I had, and I wasn't about to let Diane walk away with half of it after what she had done. As much as it pained me to admit it, I knew I had to be smart. This was about protecting what was rightfully mine. I had always been a responsible man when it came to finances. My landscaping business had grown steadily over the years, and I was proud of what I had built. But as I sat in my home office, looking over the shared accounts, the house, and everything I had worked for, it became clear I needed to make sure Diane didn't have access to any of it. Not a penny. I had already started transferring a portion of the savings into a private account that she wouldn't have access to. But I wasn't going to stop there. I called my accountant and asked him to set up a trust account that would hold the money I had accumulated over the years. I couldn't risk Diane gaining any control over my assets during the divorce process. And as for the house, that was mine, and I wasn't going to share it with a woman who had betrayed me so easily. I didn't tell Diane about the steps I was taking. I knew she would try to manipulate me into giving her what she thought she deserved. No, this was about protecting myself, making sure I wasn't left with nothing after everything she'd taken from me. Diane continued to reach out to me, but I ignored her. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me. For the first few days, she texted and called incessantly, begging for forgiveness, promising it was just a mistake and that she was ready to make things right. Her tone was desperate, but I didn't care. I wasn't interested in her apologies. I wasn't interested in her trying to salvage what we had. She had made her choice, and there was no coming back from that. I kept the silence between us as thick as possible. The more she reached out, the more I pulled away. I wasn't a fool. She wasn't apologizing because she was sorry for what she had done. She was apologizing because she wanted to fix things on her terms, to keep the life we built together intact. But I wasn't going to let her. She didn't deserve that. I had seen how she had acted when Chris was around. The way she laughed with him. How her eyes lit up in a way they hadn't when she looked at me. I was done being her second choice, her backup. And now, I was going to make sure she felt the consequences of her actions. It wasn't just about financial control. It was about making sure Diane faced the full weight of what she had done. She had humiliated me, and now I would humiliate her. The affair wasn't something I was going to sweep under the rug. Diane needed to understand that this wasn't just a mistake she could erase with an apology. She needed to face the consequences publicly. I reached out to a few of her closest friends, people who still didn't know the truth. I didn't scream it from the rooftops, but I carefully planted the seed. I told them about Chris, about the late nights, about the affair. I made sure they knew Diane had lied to all of us, pretending everything was fine when in reality, she was betraying the person who trusted her most. It wasn't easy. It didn't sit well with me to put Diane's business out there, but I had to. She had betrayed me, and now she was going to have to deal with the fallout. And then I started planning the big reveal. I needed her to feel the full weight of her actions, and I needed her to face it in front of the people she had lied to for so long. I decided to host a family dinner. Diane had always loved those, gathering everyone together, sharing a meal, talking about the good times. It had always been her way of controlling the narrative, of making everyone think she was the perfect wife, the perfect mother. I would use this to my advantage. I carefully selected the people I wanted to invite. Close family members, friends who had been around for years. People who knew us as a couple, who thought they knew us as a family. Diane's parents, my siblings, a few close friends who had spent holidays and birthdays with us. I needed them to understand what had really been going on. When everyone arrived, I kept things casual at first. Light conversation, drinks, food, the usual routine. Diane was acting like everything was fine, but I knew she could feel it in the air. There was a tension, something unspoken. She had no idea what I was about to do. I had already arranged for a few things to be ready. I had saved screenshots of the text between Diane and Chris, the social media posts, and even the photos from that weekend they spent together at the hotel. Everything that proved the affair was not just a fling, but something serious. After dinner, when everyone was relaxed, when the wine had flowed just enough to loosen everyone up, I pulled out my phone. I wasn't interested in making a dramatic scene. I didn't want to humiliate her with loud accusations. No, I simply opened a folder on my phone, connected it to the TV, and hit play. The room went silent as the first picture appeared on the screen. Diane and Chris at the beach, laughing together, close enough that it looked like something out of a romantic movie. Then came the texts, graphic, intimate, filled with promises of future meetups. More than just a friendship. Then the hotel receipts, the weekend getaway. And finally, the social media posts, tagged with hashtag reconnected and hashtag weekend away. I watched Diane's face change as the evidence played out before her friends and family. Her face went pale, her hands shaking, and I saw the panic set in. She looked around the room, hoping someone would come to her defense, but no one did. There was nothing left to say. The silence in the room was deafening. Her parents looked at her with disappointment, while my sister shot me a look of shock. The air was thick with the realization that everything Diane had worked so hard to hide had been exposed. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't throwing a fit. I was simply laying out the truth, and the truth was undeniable. Diane tried to speak, to explain, but it was too late. Every word she uttered seemed more desperate than the last. She tried to blame it on me, said I had neglected her, said I didn't pay attention to her needs. She tried to paint herself as the victim. But the evidence was right there. The people in that room saw her for what she was. A liar, a cheater. And it wasn't just me who saw it now. I didn't feel any triumph. I didn't feel any joy. All I felt was a quiet relief. I had done what I needed to do, and now Diane was facing the consequences of her choices. The people she had lied to, the friends and family who had trusted her, now knew the truth. That night, she left without a word. Her parents tried to speak to me, but I didn't have anything left to say. Diane had already made her choice. And now, it was my turn to make mine. The day after the family dinner, Diane was still calling me, begging me to talk, to make sense of things. But I had made up my mind. There was no going back. I had given her everything, and she had thrown it all away. I kept my silence. I didn't answer her calls. I didn't reply to her messages. She was nothing now. I filed for divorce. Not out of spite, but because it was the only way forward. I wasn't going to let her drag me into her mess. And I wasn't going to let her think for 1 second that she could walk away without facing the consequences. As the process continued, Diane grew increasingly desperate. She would show up at my house, begging for forgiveness, trying to make me feel guilty. She tried to get mutual friends to intervene, to get them to talk me into giving her another chance. But it's funny how silence can speak louder than words. The days after I filed for divorce were eerily quiet. Diane kept trying to reach out, but I didn't want to hear it. I had no interest in her explanations or her apologies anymore. She had made her choice, and I was done. Every phone call, every text, every tear-filled plea only reinforced what I already knew. This was over. She called me a few times, at first asking if we could talk, then pleading for a chance to fix things. But there was nothing to fix. There were no more second chances. She had broken me. At first, I found myself numb, just going through the motions of daily life. I worked, I ate, I slept, but I was disconnected from everything. Her betrayal had put a dark cloud over my world, and I wasn't sure how to lift it. Every time I went to the house, our house, I saw reminders of the life we had built. The family photos, the decorations Diane had picked out, the memories of better days before I knew she had been lying to me. But gradually, the fog started to clear. I wasn't the man who wallowed in misery or let people walk all over me. No, I was better than that. Diane had destroyed the image I had of our perfect life. But that didn't mean I had to let her destroy me. I knew I had to start over. And that's exactly what I did. The divorce process itself wasn't as messy as I expected. Diane and I didn't fight in the way some people do. We didn't argue over the house or the business. There was no need. Diane wasn't interested in a long, drawn-out legal battle, and frankly, neither was I. She wanted out of this marriage as much as I did. The only difference was that I was doing this on my terms. I had already secured everything I needed to ensure that Diane couldn't walk away with any of my hard-earned money. I had worked too damn hard to let her take anything from me. Diane had destroyed my trust, and I wasn't about to let her destroy my financial security as well. I made sure the assets were divided fairly, but firmly. I wasn't giving up a dime more than what was legally required. I was also careful about the way I structured the property division. Diane had no claim to the house, the business, or any of the savings. I wasn't going to reward her for cheating on me by letting her walk away with what I had built. The lawyer was surprised at how calm and collected I was throughout the entire process. But the truth was, I was calm because I was taking control. This was the one thing Diane couldn't manipulate. She could cry, beg, or try to pull at my heartstrings, but she wasn't getting a dime more than what I was legally obligated to give her. She had destroyed the trust between us, and now she had to deal with the consequences of her actions. As the divorce moved forward, I started to feel the emotional toll of what had happened. It was a strange mixture of anger, relief, and sadness all wrapped up in one. I had spent years building a life with Diane, and now that life was reduced to nothing more than a series of painful memories. For the first time in a long time, I found myself sitting in silence, reflecting on everything that had gone wrong. I thought about the man I used to be, the man who was trusting, loyal, and confident. I thought about the way I had blindly trusted Diane, assuming she would never betray me. And yet, she had. She had taken everything and broken it all. But as I sat there, processing the hurt, I realized something important. I wasn't broken. She was. Diane had ruined our marriage because she wasn't happy. She wasn't happy with herself. And instead of communicating that, instead of working on the marriage, she had chosen to hide behind lies and deceit. She had chosen someone else. And now, it was my turn to choose. I chose myself. I chose to move on. I began to rebuild my life piece by piece. It wasn't easy. Every corner of the house reminded me of Diane. Every room had a memory, a trace of her that I couldn't ignore. But I wasn't going to let her take over my life any longer. I spent more time at work, focusing on growing my business and getting it back on track. I poured myself into my landscaping company, something I had worked so hard to build. I hired a couple of new employees and even started expanding into new neighborhoods. I made sure every job was perfect, every client satisfied. The work was therapeutic. For the first time in a while, I was doing something for myself. I was building again, but this time, I wasn't doing it for anyone else. I was doing it for me. I had spent years catering to Diane's wants and needs, but now it was my turn to focus on what mattered to me. The money, the work, the satisfaction, it was mine. About a month into the divorce, something unexpected happened. Diane called again. This time I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the better of me. John, her voice cracked when she spoke. Can we talk? I leaned back in my chair and took a deep breath. Talk? About what? There was nothing left to say, but something about her tone, desperate, broken, made me hesitate. What do you want? I asked, my voice flat. I've made a mistake, Diane began, her words coming out in a rush. I know what I did was wrong. I ruined everything, and now I realize that I've lost everything. I can't undo it, but I need you to know I'm sorry. I'm really sorry, John. I let her talk, not interrupting, but in my mind, I already knew what she was doing. She wasn't sorry because of the affair. She was sorry because she had lost me. Do you really think a simple apology will fix this? I asked her, my tone growing colder. Diane paused. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said quietly. But I want you to know I'm not the same person I was. I've been to therapy. I've been trying to understand why I did what I did. I need to make things right. I need to make up for my mistakes. I could hear the desperation in her voice. She was trying to manipulate me into feeling sorry for her, into somehow validating her choice to cheat. She wasn't trying to fix things because she wanted us back together. She was trying to fix things for herself, to make her own guilt go away. No, Diane, I said, my voice firm. There's nothing you can do to fix this. What you've done is irreversible. You've lost me, and that's something you'll have to live with. I've made my choice, and you've made yours. We're done. I hung up the phone, feeling nothing but relief. I wasn't going to let her back in. The man she had known, the loyal husband, the man who trusted her, was gone. And in his place stood someone who had taken control of his life again. The days and weeks that followed were filled with moments of quiet satisfaction. I kept my distance from Diane, never once giving in to her calls or texts. Slowly, I started to feel the weight lift off my shoulders. The anger began to fade. I wasn't angry at Diane anymore. I was angry at myself for ever letting her get away with it. But the truth was I had already moved on. I spent time with old friends, people I hadn't seen in years. I started going to the gym again. I reconnected with old hobbies, things I had pushed aside for years because Diane didn't share the same interests. It wasn't just about moving on from her. It was about finding myself again. I was rediscovering who I was. I began making plans for the future. There was no more looking back, no more wondering if I could have fixed things with Diane. That chapter was closed. I was opening a new one where I was in control, one where my happiness didn't depend on anyone else's approval. And the best part? I was free. A few months later, the dust had settled. Diane had tried a few more times to reach out, but I never responded. The damage was done. She had made her bed, and now she was going to lie in it. But as for me, I was doing better than ever. I was focused on my business, building a future I could be proud of. I wasn't looking for sympathy. I wasn't looking for anyone to validate my actions. What mattered was that I had taken control of my life again. I had reclaimed my peace, and that's all I needed. The road ahead is mine to walk. And this time, I'm walking it alone, stronger, wiser, and finally free.